That is amazing. I wonder if he's a Trump voter. He better be. Is that it? We got anybody else coming? Just those two. Okay, well, that's one way to get to a Donald Trump JD Vance rally, is to parachute on an American flag. I got to say, I felt pretty cool running for vice president. The guy jumps out of an airplane with an American flag. So, you know, even on your best day, there's somebody's going to jump out of the plane with an American flag and make you look not nearly as cool as he is. First of all, my friends, I'm thrilled to be here. I didn't realize until we got here that we're so close to, of course, the great Army base called Fort Bragg, and that's the name of it. Not Fort whatever Kamala Harris renamed it. It's Fort Bragg, and we're proud. And I say this as a United States Marine veteran. We're thrilled to have all of our soldiers and everybody who served here. Thank you for your service, and let's go make Donald Trump the next president of the United States. We got 11 days to do it. We got some Marines here too. All right. The owners of this facility over here, they said the Marines were in town doing some artillery training. And he said that when the Marines are in town, the whole building shakes. It's really loud. And I said, and all the bars run out of beer, I'm sure, when the Marines come to town. That's okay. Look, here's the thing about my job is, think about this. I've got the easiest job in American politics. I get to go around and I get to talk about the fact that when Donald Trump was president, inflation was 1.5%. People could afford groceries and people could afford housing. That's a hell of a record to run on. I get to go around talking about Donald Trump supported our police and secured the American southern border. We had low crime and we had a closed down border. That's something to brag about. And I get to go around and talk about the fact that we had take-home pay rising faster than it had in a generation in 40 years when Donald Trump was president. That's also a record to brag on. And, you know, we got a beautiful baby back here with a Make America Great Again shirt. You know, if we were part of the Kamala Harris campaign, I'd say get him registered to vote, but not until he's 18. But look, here's the thing, and I kind of feel bad for Governor Tim Waltz, if I'm being honest with you. And I know it's you didn't expect me to stand up here and be all bipartisan, but Tim Waltz has got the hardest job in American politics. Think about this. He's got to go around and try to pretend that Kamala Harris didn't cast the deciding vote on trillions of dollars in new spending, which drove inflation through the roof, but of course she did. He's got to go around and pretend that Kamala Harris did not open the American southern border when every one of us knows that's exactly what she did. And he's got to run around pretending that Kamala Harris is the candidate of change, even though she's been the vice president of the United States for 3.5 years. He's got to pretend that somehow Kamala Harris is going to solve the very problems that she created while in government over the last 3.5 years. And I think in 11 days, the state of North Carolina, we're going to send a message to Kamala Harris. You are not the candidate of change. In fact, you're fired. Go back to San Francisco where you belong. Now, again, even though I don't like Kamala Harris's policies, look at me. I'm being a nice guy tonight. I'm talking about how Tim Waltz has got the toughest job in politics, and Kamala Harris, she's got one thing going for her, my friends. It's that every time Kamala Harris does an interview, I think that Donald Trump picks up about 100,000 votes. Now, if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, she did an interview with The View, and in 19 seconds in a softball interview, she blew up her entire campaign. Now this, my friends, this is the sacrifice that I make running as vice president of the United States. I watch Kamala Harris on The View so that you don't have to. But remember Kamala's entire campaign. Her whole campaign is to pretend that she's going to solve the problems that she caused over the last 3.5 years. She'll stand up before a crowd and she'll say, on day one, we're going to tackle the affordability crisis that affects American families. And she'll say, on day one, we are going to secure that southern border. And all of us with a lick of common sense are saying, Kamala, day one was 1,400 days ago. What the hell have you been doing the whole time? So that's been the theme of Kamala Harris's campaign. Then she goes on The View. And they say, what is one thing that you would have done differently from Joe Biden over the last 4 years? And Kamala Harris says, well, nothing comes to mind. Now, in her defense, I think that could be the slogan of the Kamala Harris campaign. Nothing comes to mind. Whatever the topic is, whatever policy we're talking about, nothing comes to mind. But in 19 seconds, she blew up the entire narrative of her campaign. The dishonesty at the heart of the Kamala Harris campaign is that somehow she's going to be different for the next 4 years from what she was the first 4 years. And I don't think any person believes it. We do not believe it. The state of North Carolina is going to reject that lie in 11 days, and we're going to make Donald Trump not just the winner of North Carolina, but the president-elect of the United States of America. And I got to tell you that there are so many problems, so many issues where we could walk through Kamala Harris and her failure. We could talk about how Kamala Harris has created a schooling system where we indoctrinate children instead of educating them, and that's a disgrace. We could talk about Kamala Harris and her crazy foreign policy. It seems like we've increasingly got a war breaking out on every continent all across the world, and I happen to believe that we're going to get back to Donald Trump's policy of peace through strength. Make America safe, make America secure. And you know, these wonderful soldiers that put on the uniform and risk their lives for us every single day, that is the most precious resource we have as Americans, is we still have hundreds of thousands of young Americans who put on the uniform and fight for us. We got to use those resources and respect those resources as precious. You don't send them to every foreign conflict. You don't send them to police the world. You send them to fight for America's national security, and that's what Donald Trump's going to do. But I think the two biggest issues, the two issues where Kamala has been such a complete and utter failure, are at the border and when it comes to inflation. And of course, these things are connected, and we'll talk about that in a second. But here's the thing. The average North Carolina family is $1,000 per month poorer than they were when Donald Trump was president. North Carolinians are paying 28% more for groceries. They're paying 35% more for gasoline. They're paying 45% more for housing. And they're doing it not because of an act of God, not because they did anything wrong, but because they've been failed by the leadership of Kamala Harris. So I got a very simple question. Do y'all want to pay more for gas? Do you want to pay more for groceries? Do you want to pay more for housing? Then are we going to make Kamala Harris the president of the United States? Hell no. What we're going to do, and it's going to be so much better, is we're going to unleash a golden age of American prosperity under the leadership of Donald J. Trump. And we're going to do it by doing the things that Kamala Harris didn't do. You know, every time they ask Kamala Harris a question, what is your specific plan for lowering prices for American families? What are you going to do actually to secure the southern border? She'll go, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. And it's like, okay, Kamala, that's nice, but you grew up in a middle-class family, and then what? What are you going to do to help those middle-class Americans you allegedly care so much about? Or they'll say, well, look, the world has gone to hell in a handbasket. It's chaos all over the world. How are you going to fix that problem? And she'll say, well, I used to work at McDonald's, and I made the hash browns when I worked at McDonald's, and I used to believe that. I don't even know if that's true, actually. I think that maybe Donald Trump has worked at McDonald's for longer than Kamala Harris has. But even if it is true, she has got no agenda to run on. And every time she talks about her agenda, again, I think that Donald Trump and I pick up about 50,000, 100,000 votes. Because she goes around, and I've never, the president made this observation to me. We were on the phone a few months ago, and he's like, have you ever seen a politician going around the country saying she's going to raise people's taxes? And I was like, that's a good point. Even the ones who are lying to you, who want to raise your taxes, will at least tell you that they want to cut your taxes. Kamala Harris is the only candidate that I've ever seen who will tell you she wants to make your tax rates higher. It's ridiculous. Meanwhile, she wants to use all that money to pay foreign companies to poach our jobs and steal our industries, and I think that's got it exactly upside down. So while Kamala Harris is promising to raise your taxes and then reward companies that ship jobs overseas, Donald Trump wants to cut your taxes and punish the foreign countries that are stealing our jobs and stealing our industrial base. That's a much better pathway to prosperity. While Kamala Harris is talking about increasing regulation, she's promising that she's going to put hundreds of billions of dollars of additional regulations on the American economy. Donald Trump and I believe that we can have clean air, we can have clean water, and we can also have a growing economy that creates prosperity for all. Cut out the ridiculous regulations and focus on prosperity for the American citizens. Kamala Harris has got the worst energy policy. She has gone out there. She's banned or tried to ban fracking. She's talked about it. She's tried to make it harder to do energy leases in the United States of America. They've all done all these ridiculous regulations that make it harder for Americans to actually use the incredible energy resources that we have right here in the United States of America. Kamala Harris wants us to buy oil and gas from tin-pot dictators all over the world. Donald Trump wants us to buy oil and gas from American workers and American territories, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And when we do that, my friends, it's going to lower energy costs for American citizens. It's going to make gas, it's going to make heat in your house more affordable. I know it doesn't get quite as cold in North Carolina winters as it does in Ohio winters, but it still gets pretty cold, right? So we want to make it easier for you to heat your home in the winter. We want to make it easier for you to fill up your tank and get to work and take your kids to school in the morning. We want to make it easier for you to afford the American dream, but the only way that we're going to do that, the only way we're going to make the American dream more affordable is to fire the current leadership of Washington, D.C. and put Donald Trump back where he belongs. Now, of course, the biggest difference, and that's a lot to say because there's a lot of differences between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Kamala Harris is, of course, more of the same on this wide-open southern border, and Donald Trump is saying, my friends, we're going to shut it down. We're going to close down that border. We're going to build the wall. We're going to reimpose deportations, and we're going to put American citizens back in charge of their own country. And it's hard to overstate how bad Kamala Harris has been on this. From the moment she came into the Oval Office, she actively bragged about undoing Donald Trump's successful border policies. She said, we're going to suspend deportations. She said that we're going to make it harder for people who are illegally in this country to get taken out of this country. She said it was compassionate to allow the Mexican drug cartels free reign over the United States of America. You know what I think real compassionate is? Putting the interests of your citizens first and cutting out the terrible sex trafficking and drug trafficking the Mexican drug cartels have been doing in this country. But she's not just rolling out the red carpet for illegal aliens in this country. Kamala Harris is also promising to give them benefits paid for by the American taxpayer. She has the audacity. Everywhere she goes, it's the most dishonest thing she does in her campaign. She has the audacity to accuse Donald Trump of wanting to go after Social Security when she is trying to give Social Security to illegal aliens. You want to bankrupt the United States of America? You want to bankrupt Social Security? Give it to illegal aliens, which is exactly what Kamala Harris is proposing to do. She talks about how Donald Trump wants to take away Medicare. Donald Trump has fought to protect Medicare his entire life as a leader of this country. Kamala Harris is promising illegal aliens will get access to Medicare. And not just that, but she'll pay, using your tax dollars, she'll pay for illegal aliens who commit violent crimes to get sex changes on taxpayer dime. It's crazy. It's hard to believe that even 10 years ago, we would have had an American Democrat running on this disgusting open borders agenda. Now, Donald Trump and I, of course, we've got a different message. To people who have come into this country illegally, our message is very clear. Pack your bags, because in 4 months, you're going back home. You know, there's so many problems that come from this wide open southern border. There's the fentanyl problem. We got 100,000 of our citizens dying every single year. Most of them are dying from fentanyl overdoses. It's the biggest cause of drug overdose in the United States of America. We've got schools in the state of North Carolina that are overwhelmed with children who don't even speak English because they were brought here by illegal aliens. Now, what does it do to the education quality of our own children when you put thousands of people in the schools who don't even speak their language? We know what that means. That means administrators, that means teachers, that means people who are going to focus on illegal aliens instead of American citizens. And look, I don't begrudge anybody who wants to come to the United States of America and have a better life, but I think two things. Number one, they ought to do it properly. Come through the legal channels, come through the right way, like millions of people have done in the United States of America. But more importantly, I do not think that the leadership of the United States, that the compassion of our leaders should be focused anywhere but on the best interests of the American citizenry who belong in this country. That's why American leaders exist, is to look after the interests of the American nation. Now, I'm going to say a couple more things. I want to recognize some people, but I know we've got some reporters here. We're going to, let them ask some questions, and I'll answer a few questions. I want to give a shout out to you guys. Have a great lieutenant governor. We've got. Sorry, Mark isn't here. We've got Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. He's not Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. Keith, could you raise your hand for us? He's somewhere around here. He's been one of the best defenders that I've ever seen of Donald Trump. He's been a great patriot for the United States of America, and of course, he's a great public servant. General Kellogg, thank you for being here. We've got the state GOP chair somewhere around here. Raise your hand. There we are, way back in the back. He's a tall guy. But you look at the early voting numbers. You look at how much we're turning out in big ways in the Republican Party. We are doing a really good job in the state of North Carolina, and we got to keep our pedal to the metal. The one thing I worry about is, I don't want folks to get complacent. We got 11 days to go, and we know the Democrats are going to pull every trick in the book to try to make Kamala Harris the President of the United States, and that means that we've got to work our tails off for the next 11 days to make sure that our guy, the people's president, Donald J. Trump, wins this election and takes back this country. Let me say a couple more things just about that. I want you to write this website down and remember this website. I want to look at it just to make sure I get it right. swampthevoteusa.com. And I'm going to repeat it, swampthevoteusa.com. When I talk about putting the pedal to the metal, that website is a big part of it. Because on that website, you can check your registration. You can check where your polling location is. You can make sure that your absentee ballot, if you've requested it, is coming to the right place. You can make sure that your registration is updated. We got to do everything, my friends, because, look, I'm a big fan of Election Day over election season. But as President Trump says, it is what it is. We've got to take advantage of every method to vote that is out there, because if Kamala Harris is doing that for her folks, then we have got to be using what we have available to get out there and to make sure that our guy is the next president of the United States. So get out there and vote. Whether it's early, whether it's election day, whether it's by mail, just make sure you get out there and vote. And here's the thing. I don't want you to just vote once. My request is that you get out there and vote 10 times. You guys are like, well, we don't do that. We're Republicans. We only vote once. We only do it the legal way. But here's the answer to vote. Here's the legitimate way. The legal way to vote 10 times is you take yourself to the polls and then you get 9 of your friends and family to go along with you. That's the way we're going to vote 10 times. Let's think about this. You look at the margins that are projected in some of these states. I mean, we could win or lose. Let's be honest. We could win or lose the state of North Carolina by a couple thousand votes. You know what that means? That means none of us want to wake up on November the 6th and be saying to ourselves, we could have done a little bit more. Here's some nightmare fuel for you. Let's say you wake up on November the 6th and Donald Trump has lost the state of North Carolina by 400 votes. Then you're going to ask yourself, what could I have done? If every single person just here today had gotten one extra person to the polls, that would be the difference between President Donald Trump and President Kamala Harris. So let's get out there and do everything that we can to get our guy across the finish line. The country is relying on us. Let's work and make it happen. One final thing. I know most people use social media some form. Maybe you just text, maybe you just call people. Whatever your favorite method of talking to your fellow citizens, make sure you tell them why you're voting for Donald Trump. Okay, whether it's X or Instagram or whatever you use, make sure people know why you're voting for Donald Trump. Because look, Kamala Harris and her allies in the corporate media, they're never going to tell the truth about this campaign. They're never going to tell the truth about our candidate, but you know who can tell the truth? We can. We can get out there to our neighbors, to our friends, to our family, and talk about why we're making Donald Trump the next president of the United States. I know that this is all, look, I know all of you are doing it, but ask yourself, we can do everything that we can, or we can do just a little bit over the next 11 days, and every single one of us needs to do everything we can to elect Donald J. Trump the next president of the United States. I know I'm working hard. I know you will too. Thank you. One final thought I'm gonna leave you with is, I did a town hall yesterday with Chris Cuomo on News Nation, and it was interesting. A woman asked me a question that made me think a little bit just about, since I became the vice presidential nominee, I've lost a few friends. My wife and I have lost a few friends. And I think that something that is true of most of us, and maybe all of us in this room, is even if we disagree with somebody politically, we would never cast aside a friend or a family member over politics. And I think it's important to point that out, because what's going on right now, of course, is, look, I think Kamala Harris legitimately is a crazy person. I mean, to the extent that she has any ideas, any original thoughts about how to govern this country, I think it's a disaster. We got to remember that most of our fellow citizens are not Kamala Harris, and thank God for that. We got to remember that there are friends and family members that may disagree with us. Maybe people who have I imagine pretty much every person in this room has lost a friend over their vocal support of Donald Trump. I think that's a disgrace. And when people talk about how to heal the country, I think number one is we got to make Donald Trump the next president of the United States. That's the first step to healing this country. The second step to healing this country is we've got to kick out leaders who try to censor their fellow Americans instead of persuade them. The biggest difference between Donald Trump's campaign and Kamala Harris's campaign is we're not lobbying big tech to silence our fellow Americans. We're not trying to silence people we disagree with. We may disagree with you, but we're going to try to persuade you instead of silence you, because we believe in the Trump campaign, in the First Amendment. We will protect your right to speak your mind, and that's an important way of healing the divide in the country, is talking to one another rather than having Kamala Harris try to shut us all up. But I think a third thing we got to do, just to repeat myself, is even if you've got somebody who's going to make a bad political decision in November, spend the next 11 days not casting them out of your life. Let's spend the next 11 days trying to persuade them that Donald Trump is the best future, not just for this country, but for them personally. And that's what I promise you I'm going to do. I'm going to try to make my argument for the next 11 days to anybody who's still open to persuasion, because here's what I believe. I believe that unless Donald Trump is the next president of the United States, Americans are still going to be unable to afford groceries. I believe that when Donald Trump is the next president of the United States, Americans, especially young Americans, are going to be able to afford to buy a home again. I believe that when Donald Trump is the next president of the United States, we are going to secure that border and stop the flow of fentanyl coming into our country. I believe that when Donald Trump is the next president of the United States, we're going to unleash a golden age of prosperity for the American people. Let's get it done, my friends. God bless you, and thank you for having me in North Carolina. All righty. It's hot out here. I like that shirt, sir. Thank you, sir. We got Christ is King. I love that shirt. Let's take a few questions because it's getting a little hot out here. And I don't think we have any more people parachuting with American flags, so we'll turn it over to the media. We even have some Bengals fans here in Fort Bragg. First question. Go ahead.
Senator Vance, how concerned is the Trump campaign over voting access in western North Carolina after Hurricane Helene? And do you believe in that case that if Harris wins, this state's results should be challenged?
Well, should the state results be challenged? I think that what we should try to do instead is make sure that every voter's vote counts. In the state of North Carolina, all across the state of North Carolina, whether we're talking about Charlotte or New Bern or the western part of the state that was hit so hard by these hurricanes. But we got to remember something, that I really think that the American government, the American president, and the American vice president failed the people of western North Carolina. That we could have done so much better in responding to that hurricane. The 82nd Airborne should have been in western North Carolina the day after the storm, not a week after the storm. And I think we would have saved a lot of lives if we had done that. Now, I've talked to the state GOP chairman. I've talked to the national GOP chairman. I think that we're in a pretty good spot in western North Carolina. But if you're in western North Carolina, particularly if you're upset by the way your federal government has handled this terrible catastrophe, the best way for you to get out there and make your voice heard is to vote for Donald J. Trump, because he's not going to forget the people of western North Carolina, and neither am I. Next question.
Hi, Monique John from ABC 11. Do you have specific plans to increase wages and expand health care access for our service members? At his last campaign event here in our area in Fayetteville, former President Donald Trump spoke on the importance of caring for our military community.
Yes, I appreciate the question, and we certainly do. And one of the things that, shockingly, I'm biased, but the media doesn't give Donald Trump enough credit for is that we did a lot, or I should say he did a lot, in his first 4 years in the White House on ensuring that veterans had more choice in health care. That's a big thing. I think all the veterans here would say they want to have more choices. We want to respect their service. And, this is especially true in areas that are rural, where you don't have close access to a hospital. Why do we force a veteran to drive 95 minutes away from their home for a doctor's appointment when it would be cheaper for them and for the government for those folks to get health care 15 minutes away from where they live? We got to promote choices for veterans. Now, Donald Trump already did that, and we're going to build upon it in the second term. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris, a lot of what we've done to promote veterans' choice in health care, Kamala Harris has actually done away with some of that stuff. They haven't implemented it as well as they should, and because of that, I think veterans don't have nearly as many choices as they should. But there's a basic principle that underlies Donald Trump's approach to our military and to our veterans. Number one, we ought to be grateful to the people who put on a uniform, and we ought to keep the promises we make to them. Way too many broken promises to our veterans. And the second point, ma'am, is it is a national disgrace that we have 25 million illegal aliens in this country, many of whom are collecting federal benefits, when we've got veterans sleeping under bridges and on park benches. We've got to do a better job by American citizens, especially our veteran community.
Senator Vance, Hal Nunn from Hoke Media Group. Thank you for coming to Raeford, North Carolina.
Thank you, Hal. It's good to be here.
Yes, it is. Good for you to be here. Our education system in North Carolina in some areas is broken. And it's a lot of the money being spent, wasteful spending, and a lot of it at the top. Our staff, our teachers, our workers are working their tails off, but they just can't seem to get over the hump on grades, reading, writing, and math. We love parents' choice.
Yes.
But we want to make education better. How are we going to do that?
Yes, sir. Well, such an important question, and we got to remember, folks, that 40 years ago, the American education system was the envy of the entire world. Whether you were rich or poor, whether you were rural or urban, we gave kids such good educations that we were leading the world in math scores, in reading scores. We had the best educated population because you know what we did? We focused on teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, and not political BS that has no place in our children's schools. Now, you talk about spending. We actually spend more per pupil than almost any education system in the entire world, and we have to ask ourselves, what are we getting from it? We're getting 40th in reading, 41st in math. We're not giving a good education to our children, and most importantly, our kids are not going to have good opportunities in life if they start out with a bad education. So we got to say, number one, we want to give parents more choices in schools. Let parents choose where they send their schools. The money ought to follow the child around, not a broken school system if that kid is stuck in a broken school. That's principle number one. And, sir, the final thing I'll say, principle number two, is we have got to stop using the taxpayers of the people in this beautiful facility to fund political BS in our schools. I think a lot of you would be shocked if you realize that, why can't our kids add 2 + 2, but they know that there are 87 genders? Why is that happening? It's happening because our tax money goes to fund bureaucrats at the Department of Education. Bureaucrats that are putting radical curricula into our schools instead of teaching our kids what they need to be successful, happy, and healthy people. We got to get back to the basics in education, and Donald Trump and I are going to fight for that every single day. Thank you, sir, for your question. We'll do one more. I'll leave you with a thought, and then we'll hit the road.
Hi, Senator Vance. Joey Pierre from the Fayetteville Observer. Just one question for you. What can a Trump-Vance presidency do to assist areas affected by hurricanes in North Carolina and in the southern and in the South?
Yes, sir. Well, obviously, hope we're going to be in a few weeks victorious, number one. But number two, Western North Carolina is hopefully going to be in the recovery phase of the campaign, right? That's where I want us to be. And by the way, I feel extremely confident about victory in the state of North Carolina, and I feel confident in victory nationally. I worry a little bit. I'm less confident, if I'm being honest with you, about how well Western North Carolina is going to recover with a broken bureaucracy that's managing this process. So here's what we got to do is, number one, for the people of Western North Carolina, we've got to make sure that they're getting the resources that they need to address their homes, to fix their homes, to maybe get new homes because so many people have had their homes completely destroyed, to replace the belongings that were taken by the flood, and then, of course, whatever help they need, because a lot of folks out there are grieving a loved one, frankly, a loved one that wouldn't, I think, have passed away if the federal government had been smarter and quicker about the response. But the most important principle is look, I've seen a lot of crazy theories out there on the internet. The biggest problem that I saw in the federal response to the hurricane, it was bureaucratic incompetence. It's that you've got 8 different agencies, each of them with different pies of the recovery thing, and they're not working together. they're sometimes competing with one another, or you got one person who should be doing something, but they think the other agency is doing that. And most importantly, the 82nd Airborne, the U.S. military, should have been in Western North Carolina the day after the storm hit. That's the most important thing. So what I promise to the people of North Carolina, to the people of the United States of America, is that when Donald Trump is president, and when you have, because you're going to have it from time to time, a catastrophic storm, our response is going to be quick, it's going to be efficient, and we're going to try to save as many lives and help people recover as well as we can. God bless you for the question. Thank you. All righty. Let me leave you with this one final thought. And again, I am so grateful for all of you being out here. I'm so grateful for your support, and I'd encourage you to do everything that you can, from knocking on doors to calling your neighbors, to get President Trump across the finish line. Because I think it's so important to remember why we're doing this. And I think sometimes if you're caught up in the red shirt versus blue shirt of politics, look, we're going to beat Kamala Harris and the Democrats, and it's going to be very fun to beat Kamala Harris and the Democrats. I'm going to enjoy November the 5th very much. But the point of beating Kamala Harris and the Democrats is to give the American people the leadership that they actually deserve, and they just don't have it right now. And I've met so many people. I could tell you so many stories about people that I've met on the campaign trail. Let me tell you one in particular, because this woman, she was a retiree, and she was raising her grandkids, and she reminded me, frankly, of my grandmother, because I was raised by my mamaw when I was a kid, because my mom struggled with opioid addiction. And so this woman told me she's raising these grandkids. Her husband is about to retire, but he's still got a couple years left. And for 40 years, for their entire marriage, they had done a special thing on Friday night. It was steak night. And I'm not talking about going to a fancy steakhouse. I'm talking about going to a grocery store, her husband grilling a steak. And as all of us know, it's those special rituals that we do with our friends and our family that actually make life worthwhile. So in good times and bad, for this woman, for 40 years, Friday night was steak night until last year. Because last year, the groceries got too expensive, and they were too worried about whether they would be able to put food on the table for those grandbabies that they cut out steak night. And the woman told me just matter-of-factly, she wasn't complaining about it, she wasn't whining about it, but what I thought is we need to have the kind of leadership so that our own people can afford to get a nice steak for their family once a week. We need the kind of leadership that makes it so that whether you're rich or poor, if you work hard and play by the rules, you can turn on the heat in your home in the middle of a cold winter night. We need the kind of leadership where we don't have so many Americans dying of fentanyl overdoses because we're securing the border and waging war against the Mexican drug cartels. We need, in other words, the leadership of Donald Trump. And we don't need it primarily because it's going to be fun to beat Kamala Harris. We need it because the American citizenry, our neighbors, our friends, our fellow Americans, they deserve better leadership from their government. In 11 days, let's make sure they get exactly that. God bless you all. Thank you so much.